All right, still watching VSA, and when we come back, we're going to be taking a look at the security issue in Nigeria and what can be done about it, spotlighting the issue of Nabiha and her siblings, as well as their father, who were kidnapped, and, Nabiha got killed eventually. Do stay with us.
Africa is rising. Again, we hear our sounds echo on the other side. Afrobeat and Afropop reinvented, hip life brought back to life, new energy infused into Kwaito and Kwela. Africa is balling. Every stroke, every shot, every raise, we find our place at the top. Taking the helm of real power, new hopes for democracies. A breed of entrepreneurial tigers, audacious storytellers, and a promising generation raring to go. Truly, Africa is rising. And this is where the stories that define our continent live.
Brighten up your morning with the latest news from the African continent.
Good morning, Africa. Welcome to Breakfast Central.
Weekday mornings from 7 a.m. West African time. Breakfast Central brings you the latest news, interviews, business, politics, entertainment, and sports.
Broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria, this is Breakfast.
At a meeting in Rotterdam, Holland.
Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. West African time on News Central, Africa First.
Thanks for staying with us. Now, in a sad development, Nabiha, her 5 sisters and their father were abducted by kidnappers in their residence in the Bwari Area Council of Federal Capital Territory. But she, Nabiha, was unfortunately killed on Saturday by the kidnappers, who are said to have demanded the sum of 60 million naira ransom for their release. Nabiha's uncle, who has been involved in the rescue efforts, said that kidnappers were infuriated when they told them that they had raised half of the 60 million naira ransom. What they met was the brutally murdered Nabiha alongside other dead people who were probably victims of failed negotiations as well. Now, these kidnappers have called and warned that they will be killing the rest of the siblings if the ransom, which they have increased to 100 million, which is 20 million each for the 5 of them remaining, is not met on the next deadline. Netizens are crowdfunding to try to meet up with the deadline, while the government is sending condolences to the families. Now, this is a very sad reality that we are experiencing in the country now. Meanwhile, there have been other kidnap cases in that state in recent times. Anyways, joining us to have the conversation, I'm joined by my guests who will help us make sense of this security situation in the country. First, we have David Otto, Director, Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies, joining us from Abuja. Thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. We also have joining us Adewale Ajadi, Public Affairs Analyst, all the way from London. Thank you, Adewale, for joining us as well.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. David, I'll start with you first. what would you say are the systemic and structural issues within the security apparatus that have contributed to the inadequacy of that sector altogether?
Well, I think in terms of security, there are three major sectors, which you can describe. Maybe you can add a fourth one. So, for example, each country has a national security strategy, and that national security strategy has to deal with all kinds of threats, that the country does face. So, in the case in point, we're talking about a national security strategy on how to deal with, kidnapping. Because, of course, kidnapping is one of the biggest threats, that Nigeria does face. There was a recent report by Beacon Consultancy that talked about, the number of people that, were kidnapped for the past 3 years. So from 2021 to, 2023, amounted to close to an average of 10,000 people being kidnapped. 5,000 being kidnapped every year. So that is close to 15,000 in 3 years. So, for example, in 2023, which was last year, more than 4,000 people were abducted by kidnappers. So clearly, there is a need for the country to have a specific strategy to deal with, kidnapping, and that should again come from four sectors. Policy-based wise. There has to be a policy on that, which is, of course, it does exist, but not specifically a policy on how to deal with kidnapping, although, the government would always say they do not negotiate, which is a policy that most governments do have, that the policy is that governments do not negotiate with, either terrorists or kidnappers, and that means, they will not pay ransom, that, they would use a kinetic strategy to release those that are abducted. So that brings you to what is then the strategic plan? Should someone be kidnapped? And why do we have a situation where, in the past year, we have more than 4,000 people being abducted? I'm not talking about the big cases that we know, the Chibok girls that have been forgotten, all the kidnappings that happen across the country. But, I think precisely the government then has to look at, what is the strategy that we have? And, if strategy is not working, which of course is not, because of the number of people that have been kidnapped. And I don't really want to focus specifically on the recent kidnapping of January the 9th in Buari, local government area of Abuja. I'm talking about, because of course anyone who is kidnapped, is the son, daughter, brother, or sister of somebody. So I think it's important to understand that, there is a lapse. Of course, from a strategic point of view, which of course shouldn't be, because Nigeria has a very fine structure that could deal with these sorts of issues from a state-based perspective. So you have a decentralized system with 36 states and the FCT. The FCT minister is in charge of the FCT, so he should be dealing with that. So that's the strategic part of it. Now, in terms of the operations and the tactical bit, what then follows is how do you prevent these kidnappings from happening in the first place? Why is it failing?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, David. I want to quickly jump on what you mentioned about systems and lapses, and I'll quickly ask Adewale Ajadi the question. We have historical, political, and socio-economic factors. How have these all come to play in terms of setting the current state of security in Nigeria?
Well, once again, I think it's great to be able to speak on this subject. But to speak on this subject, we have to move away from reacting naturally, which is emotional, to looking logically and with some detachment, unfortunately. And I extend my condolences to the parents of the young lady that was killed. But this is not something that can be dealt with in terms of our emotions. It has to be dealt with. The numbers that was quoted by my colleagues are still very, very low compared to what is really happening. It's a lot higher than that. I think we can look at 4 dimensions of this. We can look at the fact that we have criminal enterprise increasing in suburban and rural areas. So there's a crime trend where organized or better organized crime is happening in rural areas and being launched on protected people in other areas. And you can trace that back to the fact that once we moved away from a cash economy, if you are old enough to remember when we used to carry paper bags of money from banks, and when we used to have home invasions or armed robbery as the main source of crime, that used to be the kind of crime we're used to, and that changed. So crime changes because it's always opportunistic and exploitative. But there's also the social dimension of this, which is the fact that we have better organized crime, which some suggest might have international dimensions to it. But at the same time, there's a suggestion that there are resource implication to it. So most of the places where large-scale crime is occurring have deposits of minerals, and there is chaos being introduced in those areas to make sure that people are scared away and people are able to exploit those resources. So that's another dimension. The third dimension, which we are just seeing the beginning of, and is going to explode over the next few years, is a demographic explosion in young people. The average age of Nigerians is 17. If you are not catering for these young people, if you are not making sure that the value system and detachment from crime occurs, then you wouldn't be surprised that a lot of young men, especially, who are homeless or on the streets would be involved. And I think the final point I need to make to you is about the fact that the reaction to crime is not as sophisticated as the crime that is developing. So we are reacting. We don't have a preventative strategy. We don't have an early warning system. We don't have all of the things that would equip us to be able to be effective in a country as large and as complex as Nigeria, which would have changes in crime over time. So these all dimensions of the issue that we're facing.
All right. Thank you, Adewale, as well. Gentlemen, we're quickly going to join our correspondent in Abuja, who's going to give us updates on these issues that we have been talking about. We have Amadine Uyi from the Federal Capital Territory on standby. Hello, Amadine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have been discussing the sad reality of the level of kidnappings that we've been experiencing, especially in the Federal Capital Territory. Could you give us updates, especially on the most recent issues that we're seeing?
Okay, the reality is that the level of kidnapping in Abuja is increasing. Now, what we have is that we have municipal area councils. You have the Abuja Municipal Area Council where you have the city center. You have the Buhari Area Council where we had cases of kidnappings from the 2nd of January. Then you also have the Kuje Area Council, the Gwagwalada Area Council. These are also area councils that have experienced kidnappings too. But the sad part is that most of these cases don't get the attention of major headlines in national dailies, and because the families of the victims choose to just bear their cross, negotiate with the kidnappers, pay ransom, and get their family members released. Now, the popular case which has been on the headlines since last week was the case of Nabira, where kidnappers went to their residential home, a residential place of abode, and kidnapped the father and six daughters from the home. Now, when the kidnappers had surrounded the house, the father quickly called a cousin who alerted policemen. And as the cousin was trying to get to the house with the policemen, the kidnappers opened fire and killed that cousin. I think one policeman lost his life, one other sustained gunshot wounds. Now, while in the custody of the kidnappers, what happened was that the father was able to negotiate. The kidnappers had demanded 100 million naira. The father was able to negotiate up to 60 million naira, and he was released to go and source for the money. While in the process of trying to source for the money, he had met family members. They were trying to raise, I think they were able to raise about 10 million naira. And when he got back to the kidnappers last week, they told him on Thursday that they are going to send a message to him. And on Friday, they called him that he should go to a certain location along the Abuja-Kaduna expressway. And when he got there, he found the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Nabira, who is a student of the Ahmadu Bello University, a 400-level student. Now, the surprising thing was that Nabira's body was not the only body at the scene. Another woman with the daughter who is yet to be identified, she was also killed by the kidnappers. Another young man also at the scene, he was also killed by the kidnappers. So you see that it was not only the family of Nabira that were in the hands of the kidnappers, there were certain other people who could not raise their ransom, and they were also murdered in cold blood. But Nabira got to the headlines because her family member, one of her family members, knew a journalist who was able to tell the journalist the story. Therefore, it was able to go viral. But for the other lady and her daughter and the other young man, they did not know, their families did not know how to get it to the press. So they have been murdered and they remain unidentified. Then there was another incident that happened at the Sagwari estate at Duse, close to Buhari, also last week. Our crew went on ground where a young man, the kidnappers came into an estate to the house of a young man, a lawyer, and abducted his wife and daughters. As of yesterday, we had gotten information that his 13-year-old daughter had also been killed by the kidnappers because he could not raise ransom to pay for his wife and other children who are in the hands of the kidnappers. So as of yesterday, he has started a crowdfunding, pleading with Nigerians to help him to get his children out of the hands of the kidnappers. Now, these are two separate incidences. What we realized was that they were being mixed yesterday as one particular incident. There are two separate incidents. We have also heard of cases at the Kuje area. At the Pegi, there's a place called Pegi in the Kuje area of the federal capital. To get there from the Kuje township, you have to follow a very narrow path. In fact, somebody that lives there told me that last week that from 6 p.m., if you are living in that area, that vicinity, you cannot go home because for fear of kidnappers. It's a community surrounded by a lot of hills, and it's easy for the kidnappers to come down from the hills and abduct whoever they want to. There have been cases of Nigerians and residents of the FCT being kidnapped from that particular area. Let's not also forget the case that happened sometime last year where at the University of Abuja staff quarters, where kidnappers went and abducted several people living in the lecturers' quarters. So it's been on the increase, and I think at this point in time, it's reached a crescendo.
All right, Amadine, this is a very sad situation, and thank you so much for the update. Like you did say, we know about Nabiha's story because someone in her family decided to tell the press about it. There's so many others that we're not even, aware of, and it's so sad. But Amadine, thank you so much once again for the update.
Thank you, too.
All right, I'm still with my guests, David Otto and, of course, Adewale Ajadi. David, with this information that we've got, I want us to talk about the issue of paying ransom or not paying ransom. I know that as at, I think, last year or 2 years ago, there were quite some controversy where the federal government was saying something about penalizing those who pay ransom. At this point, it's now looking like it's up to netizens or people to crowdfund and save the lives of those who have been kidnapped. And even at that, there is no guarantee that these people are going to come out alive, because some people are so evil that they kill them before they even ask for ransom. And then people pay the ransom, and before you know it, they're finding the bodies of their loved ones. What is your thought on the ransom situation? David? Do we still have David with us? All right. While we're waiting for David, Adewale, I don't know if you got the question.
I had your question. My point is we have to, the press has to reduce the emotional engagement with this and ensure that we can find solutions that can be effective. There is no way with the increases in population in Nigeria, there are over 200 million Nigerians allegedly, that you're not going to have crime. And some of it is going to be really, really painful. And it's not going to change fundamentally because we're going to have increased amount of young people who are going to engage in this. So we have to, the government has to develop a systematic approach. Denying people solutions, like saying they can't pay ransoms, we will not work. It's just that simple. I'm not going to put any final point on it. It's just not going to work. Everybody wants to do something. And if you're not going to help them develop a strategic or a tactical approach to this, it's not going to happen. I think the government has to engage the populace in the security solution more actively, not just giving nice words that says, oh, we're all in it, or police is your friend. They need to engage this because this is a very emotive issue. They need to ensure that the citizens can do something about it. And if we are getting into solutions, if you want me to get into solutions, I'll suggest a few. But certainly, it's not going to work to tell people that they can't pay ransom if you cannot offer them an approach that's going to work. That's going to suggest to them that something is being done and is actively being done, and these are the steps being taken, that you're transparent about those steps, and that you are willing to share with them your own failings when there's failure, and making them aware of what is potential failure, and organizing in such a way that people can have some response that suggests things are going to work. One classic example is get local governments to work. I mean, you can't, in these places you're talking about, we are suburban areas of Abuja or rural areas of Abuja, what local government is functioning in those areas? Who does anybody go to talk to? Do they know who the DPO is in those areas? Do they know what is organized as a possible solution to kidnapping? These are all information that they should be aware of that would reassure them that could improve the situation. But certainly one of the critical things that government has to get into before you get into the position where someone is taken kidnapped is early warning systems. Nigeria should be covered across the board with early warning systems, both technological and human, that tells people when there are trends, that makes them aware of what the risks are, that informs them about what they should do if somebody is at risk, that gets all this. And it's so easy to organize because we have all these estates, to work with the estates, to make sure that every estate has the kinds of simple solutions, cameras, all of these things that can easily be purchased and put in place, to organize private security in such a way that it's accountable. There's so many things that we can do. And we just need the intentional response from government and the disciplined engagement of citizens to achieve this.
All right, Adewale, thank you for that. We have David Otto back with us as well. David, please, can you confirm you can hear us?
Oh, loud and clear. Thank you very much.
All right. Now, Adewale has spoken extensively about the ransom issue, but I also still want to ask you for your opinion. In terms of paying ransom, it's quite a dicey situation, because some would say that if you pay ransom, you're enabling these people. And just like we've seen, it's looking like it's becoming the most lucrative business where you kidnap people and ask for millions as though, they're plucking it from trees. But at the same time, if the ransom is not paid, people lose their lives in the process. These people are not just bluffing. They kill them and, use their bodies to send a message. So what is the balance?
I lost you there at some point.
Come again? David, did you say something? Do we still have David, please? Okay, I think we're having challenges with David's network, but I still can direct that question to you, Adewale. The confusion as to whether or not to pay ransom. I know that you've spoken about it extensively, but where does the balance come in?
There is really no. How do you balance this out? The life of your family and a government that hasn't given you information on what to rely on. So I think that the critical challenge is always to do what government does, which is say don't pay ransom, and recognize we're about to reach another level of institutionalization of kidnapping. Because the minute people are crowdsourcing funding on the internet to pay kidnappers, we're out of any kind of boundaries, and people will be kidnapped more and more because people will pay for it online, or that's what they're going to believe, and people are going to die more and more. And so I don't know how you get around it. So, but one thing we have to go back to is what has worked in the past. And one classic example that worked in the past at the end of last year and beginning of this year was when the Naira policy, which is the most attacked policy that I've ever seen in Nigeria, was operating. Kidnapping stopped completely. What does that tell us? Why shouldn't government look into that and see what really worked in that instance? Because kidnappers stopped. There were no ransom being paid. What happened there? What can we learn from what happened then? What was effective? This is something we've seen in recent past.
Okay, Adewale, still talking about measures that have worked, right? We're in the era of technology, you know, and there is an advancement in technology across different facets of government, of economy, and one of that should be advancement as well in the security sector. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it not possible that security operatives jump on technological advancement, increase technological facilities and equipment and things that can help them track and trail these kidnappers? Is it not a possibility? Because at least we've seen it in other countries.
It is very achievable. The government should invest in it, but they have not. I mean, we should have part of the Nigerian police and the Nigerian army, a drone squadron that covers the whole of Nigeria. That's number one. And I go back to the point about early warning systems, because a few years ago I was involved with C1, the early warning system of IGAD, and I helped them plan for about 9 years. So I can talk a little bit to this. If you really, really, really want to handle these things, you should have an early warning system that spans the entire country, that has both technological solutions and human solutions. Every village should have an early warning committee that picks up issues of concern and feeds it into a database. And that is properly sourced and patterns are identified. These are things that should be done across the country. Every single border should be covered. And it's an opportunity to employ people. The second thing that is not technological but is critical is all Nigeria. We should stop this thing about the National Youth Service Corps. We should make sure that every Nigerian that graduates to a particular level serves 1 year in the police or in some security force. If they are capable of serving, then firstly, we demystify the police, and secondly, we give people self-defense understanding and understanding of our security architecture. These things are important. We have to increase the sophistication of our solution as our population continues to increase and the criminals start to increase in their own capacity. The one thing that we don't bear in mind when we talk about kidnapping in Nigeria, so it's a slight diversion but important, is that a lot of the people who are involved in these things use psychotic drugs. And so they're using drugs. You're not talking about the old style Nigeria of the 70s and 80s where maybe they're using marijuana or whatever. They're using heavy drugs. They're out of their minds half of the time. And they're quite capable of doing the worst possible thing like killing people and killing many, many people. So we who are dealing with it, the police, the soldiers and everything, we need to get to a different level also. We can't rely on the old style of what we used to do. And the government has to invest in all the tools that is necessary to do that. In the same way they're doing it with digital businesses, they need to do it with the security system. And I think it's a mistake to call this a security failing. No country in the world is completely secure. What we have is a crime wave and a crime pattern, and we need to deal with it. We are never going to get to a completely secure Nigeria. That country doesn't exist anywhere in the world. What we want to do is reduce crime. Let's work on reducing crime so that people are not killed so easily.
Okay, let me try again if we have David with us. David, please, can you confirm you can hear us? Okay, we don't have David, so I'm going to continue with you, Adewale, and thank you for your opinion so far. Now, still speaking of security operatives, right, there have been, you know, issues or situations where I think distrust has entered the picture, you know, for the security agencies, and one of which is something that happened last year where the security people were, you know, trying to fight some terrorists or bandits, and then for some reason, you know, the remote area that they were trying to save was bombed, and according to them, it happened by mistake. So people are saying that if we're entrusting our lives, you know, in the hands of the security operatives who bomb people or places that they're trying to protect by mistake, then what is our fate then? So can we trust the security sector, the security operatives, to even save us from this situation?
The question you should be asking is, can we not? It's not can we. There is no error-proof system. So we had an error, and the pain of that error is many people died. And so what are they doing to make sure that that never happens? That's the question. We need to make sure that when we employ technology, because it was technology that was employed, and it was intelligence that was gathered, we need to make sure that the intelligence goes through different ways of proofing it. But to do that, you need everyday Nigerians involved in the security architecture of Nigeria. It can't be that some experts do it and we know nothing about it, which was my point about the National Youth Service. Everybody who is a Nigerian citizen should be able to serve at least 1 year in security apparatus, to understand it, to trust, to build a nation. People, owners, Nigeria, not a few people, the military capacity or the police. If everybody is accountable, even when you leave the service, you will understand what is going on. If somebody stops you and does the wrong thing, you know what is going on. So some of the people that are doing these things, I also have had some security training. Why would citizens not have some security training too? So we go back to the issue. If the police is our police, if the military is our military, if the customs is our customs, if immigration is our immigration, if the NCDC is our NCDC, all of us need to partake in this thing, serve there, and know what they're doing. And then we'll be better placed to trust them or to hold them accountable. Right now, I train the police, I train the army. I find that many people are dedicated within these institutions. They are committed to the security of Nigeria, but they're also human. They make mistakes. Some of them are corrupt. That's a fact. And some of them are not concerned. That's also a truth. So these are things that have to bring all of us in so that we learn what they are learning. We understand what the direction of our security architecture is. And so when something happens, when there's a gap, we can point out this is why there's a gap. And that's what builds trust. So the government has to invest in that. And we structure NYC to be like that.
All right, Adewale, thank you so much. We're still going to continue this conversation. We just want to go on a short break. This is still Village Square Africa. We've been talking about the security issues we're facing in Nigeria, especially that in the FCT. We're going to come back to have the conversation very shortly. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on Village Square Africa. We're talking about the sad situation that Nigeria is grappling with at the moment, speaking of the issue of kidnappings and killings of innocent victims, even after or before ransoms are paid. I still have my guest with me, Adewale Ajadi, Public Affairs Analyst, joining us from London. Thank you so much, Adewale, for staying with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Adewale, let's talk about criminal justice. A lot of times we hear that this, kidnappings happen, and although most of them get away with it, but how serious are the punishments meted on those who are captured? And do we need to intensify, the justice system, the penalties, so that others can learn?
Well, before we get to punishment, we need to improve detection rates.
Right.
We need to make sure that anybody who does this know they're going to be caught. We can learn lessons from other countries. So some of the countries that have the greatest kidnapping issues, Venezuela is one, I think Brazil is another. These are large. We talk about 4,000 in Nigeria. That's so insignificant when they talk about kidnapping. So even the United States has more people kidnapped than Nigeria. So you look at that. But then it's detection that matters. And we have to improve our detection rate. The Nigerian criminal justice system is reliant almost completely on confessional evidence. The kinds of fingerprinting technology, the kinds of DNA technology, the kinds of blood tracing technology, all of those things are so rarely utilized in our processes. So we need to improve criminal detection rate so that anybody who commits a crime know you're going to be caught. And so the fact that you commit more than life, all of these things are standard. It is the that's critical. Then speed of trials. The speed of our trials is abysmal. It's awful. Somebody commits a crime and is 9 years in detention before judgment is found, and then maybe by that time all the evidence is lost. We have to do a lot better. We have to do a lot better, and part of that is moving the records of the court away from long handwriting by justices to recording in different ways and keeping the record of the court independent of the judgment of the judges, so that the speed, and then holding counsels accountable for delays upon delays and postponements of motions and all of that, and taking motions back and forth to appellate jurisdictions. All of that has to stop. We need to tighten these things up. We also need to make sure that every state has a constitution. That way the judiciary in states can be independent, because a lot of the crime that is committed and prosecuted are state crimes, not federal crimes. And they're committed and the states have to go through prosecution. And if you don't organize the state judiciary to be independent and effective enough, then you have the bottleneck there. There's an overhaul of the judicial system that ought to occur. And people should then see that crime does not pay, and it is speedy and it is effective. And then you will start to see the rule of law, and the effectiveness of the rule of law means that things like kidnapping is a very rare occurrence rather than a regular occurrence.
All right, very quickly, let's talk about, we've talked about the role of the government in this, we've talked about community role and all whatnot, but what would you say that individuals can do to be safer? You know, what are the things that they need to do to ensure that they do not fall into the hands of these people? It's not like we can predict their next attack or where they're targeting next, but what are the basic things that individuals need to know in terms of protecting themselves against these people?
I speculate on this a lot, I have to be honest, because I live in Abuja most of the time, and I am at risk as everybody else is. And those of us who live in estates moved to estates because we thought that would create greater protection. So I think estates need to have cameras and lights at different vantage points to identify, because these people were not kidnapped on the road, they were kidnapped in their homes. The second thing is the fences that we build in our own homes are also a danger to us. If you look at how opaque these fences are, most of these fences, anybody who has access into the house and locks the door of those fences can keep you in those houses forever. Nobody will know something is going on. So, that's another risk. We need to reduce the risk. We need to, rather than reacting emotionally and seeing everybody doing the same thing, we need to make sure that their cameras, their vantage points, their lights, the people who act in security positions are accountable. They are checked by the police before they become security people. Private security people have to submit who's their members, so that, and then people need to also collect information on what they observe. Have a kind of database or notebook of what you observe, strangers walking around dressed in this color, this person, so that when these are submitted regularly to the police. So basically what I'm saying is that security needs to be better organized. They're very difficult things that you don't want people to be doing, but they have to do it, which is make sure that their mobile phones have locators on them, software where they can be located. They need to put things on themselves that, in Apple, they call it a tag. You put something in your pocket that can easily be located technologically. So many other things like that, so that we are actually able to move around. And I think the most important thing is that make sure that somebody knows where you're going, knows when you're expected in that place, so that if you're not seen and you are not located in that place, somebody is able to raise the alarm.
Right.
What's going on.
All right, on that note, I want to say a big thank you to you, Mr. Adewale Ajadi, Public Affairs Analyst, joining us from London. Thank you so much for your opinion and your thought on this issue. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, and I also want to say thank you in absentia, even though we're having some network issues with David Otto, Director, Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies from Abuja. We really do hope that there is an end in sight to the incessant kidnappings and, of course, killings and even carnage of innocent victims, especially in the FCT. We hope that there is a reform of the security sector and that the security operatives can hop on developing technology to be able to track and trace these people. This is where we call it an end on VSA. Do also join us in our subsequent episodes. And of course, let's continue the conversation on all our social media handles. My name is Blessings Mosugu. It has been VSA.
Africa is rising. Again, we hear our sounds echo on the other side. Afrobeat and Afropop reinvented, hip life brought back to life, New energy infused into Kwaito and Quella. Africa is balling. Every stroke, every shot, every race, we find our place at the top.